Disney theme park characters, have there been situations where you had to break character? What was the reason consequences? When I was a kid, my dad convinced me to tell the evil queen that I thought she was the fairest one of them all. Gotta go on a date with her the next day. Turns out Captain Hook was her boyfriend. At a character breakfast, he leans in, with the huge mask swallowing my head, and whispers, "We'll share her." I thought it was the coolest thing ever at the time. Story 2. I couldn't even get the zombies at Halloween Horror Nights to break character. Asked one where the restroom was, and he flung his arms in the proper direction and grunted. Pretty hilarious. Story 3. I wasn't a character, but was a cast member. I was walking from backstage into the park. If you've seen the transitions, they are a shape to keep people from peeking in. I was pushing a dolly handcart. The ones we used had 2 long supports sticking out from the end. As I was going, though, Winnie the Pooh was walking in from the other side. I hit him or her square in the leg with it. Hearing Winnie the Pooh say, "Damn," was a pretty damn funny. Story 4. I watched Jack Sparrow talking to a kid when the kid started puking everywhere. He said, "Too much of the old apple juice, eh?" Been there myself, even ran out once. All the while, the kid is just projectile vomiting everywhere. Story 5. I was at Disneyland once, and the sheriff of Nottingham was fake menacing a child. He reached out to touch the kid's balloon, and for some reason it popped. The character actor was clearly stunned. A new balloon appeared less than 30 seconds later. Story 6. My cousin used to do this when I was a kid. We'd always go try to find her on days we knew she was working. She mostly played Pooh Bear. She would never say out loud, "Hi, Nougatuck," but she would get very animated and jump around to give us hugs. Occasionally, she'd still say things like, "I have a rumbly in my tummy." I thought I was the coolest kid because I knew Pooh Bear. Story 7. I have a close friend who was Woody for a while at Disneyland. He said that one time the A float caught on fire during a show, and they had to play it off completely in character. They danced around it and had to quickly get it backstage to deal with the problem. He said they played it off well enough that no one seemed to notice. There wasn't any panic. He said he had never seen an instance of anyone breaking character because everyone was very well trained, and there's always at least 6 or so cameras that can see you at all times. I also one time offered an unopened water bottle to an employee when it was near 100 degrees, and he said if anyone at Disney saw that, he would be fired. They can't take anything from guests. He also mentioned the cameras constantly watching both crew and patrons. One time an acrobat fell off a float, face planted into the ground and knocked herself out. They had to surround her in a circle and dance in sync as they dragged her body away. They played it off well, and apparently no one noticed. Story 8. I've seen articles that face characters can leave at any time if harassment is bad, using in-character excuses. Costume characters always have an attendant with them to control unruly guests. Story 9. Not a character, but my family went to Disney World a few times when I was a kid. My dad was abusive, physically and verbally. We eventually left him when I was 12. He was awful on vacations for just being miserable in general. It was Valentine's Day, and my mom, dad, older sister, and I were at one of the parks. I don't remember which. All of the characters had big red hearts on a string around their necks. My sister was at oldest 8, and I would have been 6. We had just gotten ice cream, and my sister and I were excitedly looking around for our favorite characters. My sister just saw Eeyore, her all-time favorite character, so she turned around and my dad, not paying attention, ran right into my sister holding her ice cream cone and got it on his shirt. He hauls off and smacks her in the side of the face, knocking off her glasses and making her drop her ice cream cone. She starts crying as my mom starts giving him crap while he defended his actions, saying she should have watched where she was going. The next thing we know is my sister is being hugged by Eeyore. It shocked her out of crying, and she was suddenly so incredibly happy because Eeyore. Eeyore just kept hugging her while my mom started taking pictures. Eeyore stopped hugging my sister only to point to his paper heart, then to her, then he hugged her again. There is a picture somewhere in my mom's basement of my sister and I standing with Eeyore. My sister beaming, but clearly looking like she had been crying. I still think about that Eeyore to this day and wondered what they were thinking. It was the early 90s when people were largely still expected to mind their business when it came to such things. And reading these other comments makes me realize he may not have been able to do anything else anyway, but I appreciate his gesture nonetheless. Story 10. I wasn't a character, but worked closely with them as a photographer. Disney performers are trained to never break character for whatever reason. They have ways of signaling their character attendant that they are in distress, and it's generally up to the character attendant to avoid any weird or uncomfortable situations. As far as weird situations, they do get people that stalk them in the park. Like some people get in those lines multiple times to get a photo with a specific performer. The weird side of Disney fanatics or something else. Story 11. Worked at the Disney store in late 87 and 88 in Orange County, say. I think at the time it was like one of only a handful of stores open. The back of the store had a big screen where we constantly played some Disney video. Every once in a while, the biggest, Muscular. blackest, gayest dude would come in and kindly request we play anything poo-related. He'd then proceed to prance around the store. He came in the evenings towards closing and sing the tiger parts of either dialogue or any song. Turns out he was one of the tigers at Disneyland. Dude just loved being Tiger. Story 12. The type of people that play characters are very into it. If something comes up that needs to be addressed, they will handle it in character. You've probably heard stories about characters helping kids find their parents. These days, characters always have handlers nearby that have walkie-talkies. Story 13. A few days ago, me, my sister, and her friend went to the New Galaxy's Edge area. My sister's friend was around 6 feet 1 inch and had never seen Star Wars. We were walking around and Chewbacca ran up to her. He was around her height, and then hugged her. He put his hand above his head, showing they were both tall. She was super embarrassed, and while we were walking away, he did that fist pump thing. Since then, we refer to her as Chewbacca's girlfriend. Seriously, the cutest thing ever. Story 14. At the Mouse, we had a kid who had a checklist shirt on. On it said Darth Maul, Darth Vader. Then the last one beat cancer. The kid was 6 years old. Then I'm told backstage that the parents wanted to do something special for him in the show. But my director couldn't find a spot in the show where this special moment would work. So we finished the show, Jedi Training Academy, and set up a meet and greet with the kid. I get out there and this kid's whole family is at the greeting area. I mean everyone. So I hear, "Okay, champ, you ready?" Kid replies, "Yup." He pulls out this pill, swallows it, and the family breaks down crying. The kid yells, "I'm a real Jedi!" Come to find out, the kid took his last chemo pill that eradicated his cancer in front of us. He waited all morning to show us that he was brave and a true Jedi. We were all holding back tears. I worked at Club Disney for the brief time it was open. We had codes we used on the radio headsets that were coordinated with character names. For instance, code B-Alu meant there was B-Lud that needed to be cleaned up immediately. One day, I'm taking a stroll around the club to check on things when I spot a small boy about 2 years old taking a massive dump right in the middle of the play area. He sees me, starts to cry, and runs away with no clothing on the lower half of his body. I get on the radio and can't think of what to say as we hadn't discussed a code for human feces in the play area and naked kid running around. So I just called, "I have a code poo situation in the play area and piglets on the loose." I was sitting with a group of guys by where Mickey and Minnie get dressed. When they came out, the guys started catcalling Minnie. The guy that was Mickey said, in a perfect Mickey voice, "If you look at my girlfriend again, I'm going to pop you." Story 15. Saw a recent video on YouTube of a Ray talking to this little girl and her dad had just started filming. Apparently, the story the little girl was telling got Ray laughing so hard. She had to turn her face away and eventually got up and ran away because she couldn't stop laughing at whatever the little girl's story was. Super adorable. Story 16. A bit off topic, but I thought of a time me and my boyfriend went to a haunted house, and there was a creepy guy following us every time we turned around, so my boyfriend goes, "I farted there." And the guy stares and us, and still in character goes, "I like farts." Story 17. I wouldn't say break, but I was a lifeguard, and I had to ban this kid from going down the water slide. Every single time I told him he had to be feet first, and every time he said okay, but he kept going head first. And it got to the point where the other kids saw him and were copying him. He left and cried to mom and dad, and I explained to mom and dad why. They left and cried to my coordinator, and my cord came back saying that wasn't very magical. I explained after several times of this kid not listening. Other kids were copying him. In any case, I got a stern talk to about being the nice lifeguard who explains why versus the mean lifeguard who just yells orders. Later that day, that kid was running across the deck, despite several requests not to, tripped and ate concrete. Don't hate me because I don't feel bad. Story 18. On a Disney cruise, I met a guy who looked exactly like Peter Pan. When we asked him, he said, "Nope, Peter Pan has brown eyes," or something like that. The next day, when we went to get a picture with Peter, he got super close and whispered, "See? Peter has brown eyes, hands down best Disney employee I've ever met." He was also Pluto. Story 19. Woody W. Character Department Magic Kingdom many years ago. I can't remember breaking character, but I do remember working the restaurant at the Contemporary for dinners. One time we had a Make-A-Wish kid as a guest, and they were just the most awesome kid, and it was just heartbreaking to know why they were there. So our lead let us do a group hangout with the kid for something like an hour in costume. Playing and running around and having fun. You could never play like that in the parks. You'd start a kid riot. No consequences. We just all hoped we made that little kid happy. Bonus fun fact, the goofy costume for the Electric Light Parade was worn by a float driver. Because the driver was seated, no pants with that costume, just the glittery top and head and gloves. Story 20. One of the traditions for our college sorority back in the 80s was that the day after initiation, all the new members and their big sisters would go to Disneyland sporting their brand new letters to wear. One of the costume characters in the parade kept throwing gang signs or something at us, and we were so confused. Turns out it was one of our sisters who had to work that day. She was trying to do our sorority's hand symbol, but with her hands in oversized furry gloves, it didn't show up so well. Story 21. A face performer broke character for my husband and I. I won't say which park, but we took a trip to Disney about 2 months after our infant son passed. He was our first. Our entire nursery was Neverland, Peter Pan themed. We always wanted to take him to Disney, have him meet Peter. Well, he couldn't. I got a memorial tattoo, an exact replica of my son's hospital ink handprint, and we got a picture of Peter Pan with the tattoo. We were alone with him and his handler. I tearfully explained the situation before asking him to pose with my arm. He took lots of photos with my tattoo and us, and afterward he hugged me tight. Told me he was proud of me, and God bless us, and he was so sorry for our loss. It was amazing, emotional, and I'll never forget that Peter Pan was proud of me for finding the strength to keep on living. It honestly meant the world. I'm so glad he broke character. I'll always treasure those photos and that memory. Story 22? I did the college program at WDW. Never saw a character break when I worked audience control for parades. Definitely saw a few fully costumed characters puke in their heads, and Prince Naveen once got heat exhaustion and managed to leave the parade route fully in character. Once the parade was over, we saw him in the back almost completely passed out. Typically, the parade will just speed up to double time if a character actor is in distress. Story 23. Maybe someone who actually played Tarzan can confirm this for me. Disneyland used to have a Tarzan character, but you don't see him anymore, since the characters are always expected to pose for photos and selfies. And Tarzan wore nothing but a loincloth. Women were constantly grabbing the actor's ass when they got in close. So the park just quit that character. Update. After some confirmation of the bad behavior, there are still recent Tarzan sightings. It appears Disney paused the character and redesigned his loincloth costume into one more like a pair of shorts and a jungle vine sash. Apparently, women are still grabby, but the costume department tried to make it a little less easy. Story 24. My neighbor worked at Disney for years. One day, he was stocking shelves in a gift shop and came around the corner and nearly ran into none other than Paul and Linda McCartney. Before he could stop himself, he loudly exclaimed, "Crap! It's the McCartneys!" He immediately realized how big of a breach of Disney cast member etiquette he had committed and turned 12 shades of red. But before anything bad could happen, Paul and Linda just smiled and laughed and introduced themselves. Apparently, they were wonderfully laid back about such things, and quite used to surprised reactions when people recognized them in public. He didn't get into any trouble. His boss saw the whole episode and thought it was hilarious. And I think they both signed a hat or something for him as they were checking out. Story 25. This reminds me of that story about the little girl and boy whose parents passed that got Vipe treatment for a day by a Disney park character. One of the most touching stories I've ever read stuck with me. Story 26. Visitant from last year here. On the Halloween night, I've seen 2 female employees working on the store, not characters though, clearly upset by some kind of superior order. The exact dialogue was, "Yeah, sometimes it gets hard. I know it does, but that attitude was unacceptable. I didn't resist, and I said, I guess even in Disney working sometimes sucks." The first girl immediately stood up and smiled as bright as she could. "What do you mean? Working here is awesome every time." I couldn't help but feel that she was agreeing with me, but never breaking the Happy Land face. Awesome place. Story 27. My mom was a costume character for a couple of years at Disneyland. She was very committed to keeping character, but there was one instance where she broke character. 2 teens jumped her when she was playing Piglet and started beating her. At first, she just tried to block and defend herself, but at one point, she knocked one of the boys to the ground and pinned him. Considering my mom's only 4 feet 10 incher and was wearing 50 pounds. Of costume, I consider that fairly impressive. The other kid continued to assault her, and I think she may have yelped or cried out because the kid she had pinned heard her and said, "Oh crap, it's a chick." Like no crap, dumb duck. Most of the shorter characters are women because, well, they're shorter. Cast members came to help her and the kids were banned from the park. My mom got in a lot of trouble for that too, though, because she broke character. Ayers. She was suspended for a couple days. Story 28. So story time. I have 3 cousins who have been Disney princesses, 2 of which are still at it. About a year ago, my grandparents decided to go visit one of my cousins out at Disneyland Tokyo. My grandpa has relatively advanced Alzheimer's, but he is generally easy to handle. Anyway, somehow he got separated from my grandma and started to panic a little, looking for anyone he knew. Turns out the first person he found that he recognized was my cousin in full Cinderella character. They allow the characters to come out and walk around the park in Tokyo, because the Japanese are super respectful. He started to talk to my cousin, calling her by her real name and quite directly asking her where his wife, her parents were. He started to get pretty angry and frustrated when she wouldn't give him a straight answer. She kept character as best she could, but her handlers whisked her away pretty rapidly. He was reunited with the rest of the group soon after, but it was quite the scene. Story 29. They do not break character. My best childhood friend is a face character. During the interviews, they bring you through a ton of challenging scenarios like kids with lost parents, kids who act mean, etc. If you break character, there are 1,000 other people of your exact height and hair color ready to play the character better than you. They even made her do an impression of a Disney character without speaking. She had to be able to just portray the essence of the character. And if they couldn't guess who she wrote down, her interview was over. They are incredibly serious about staying in character. Anytime something bad enough would happen that they should break character, their handler would just guide them away and handle it themselves. Bonus info: she isn't allowed to tell anyone who she plays, except family and friends, or post anything about work on social media for the entirety of her time at Disney, or else she will be fired. Story 30. I have a story of someone I know who used to do the mascot stuff at Disneyland. Back a couple of years ago, he had to dress up as Nick from Zootopia for his shift. Now, the thing about this costume is that the tail is massive metal spring to help give the illusion that it can move on its own. With that out of the way, one day he was doing his rounds with his partner, Judy, and they had a bit of a troublemaker who was being a little rough and pulling on his tail. Keep in mind, this tail is pretty heavy at around 40 pounds and is attached to his back pretty firmly. With no real proper field of vision other than the tunnel vision they get, no breaking character, and no security nearby to stop to issue, he was in a bit of a pickle. Fortunately for Nick, the father of said troublemaker told him to stop and apologize. He did so with a sour disposition that gave the impression he really didn't care. After said apology, a young girl behind him goes, "Hey, Nick," and without missing a beat, he does a complete 180 attempting to hit the troublemaker with his tail. He gets purchase and smacks the kid with a good thud and knocks the kid on his ass. While he was giving attention to the little girl, his mind was racing that he was going to get fired for this little stunt. But luckily for him, the dad pulls through by laughing at his kid's misfortune, telling him something along of the lines of, "You know you deserved that, right?" He had some other stories of some of the stupid stuff they would do, but for reals, they drill it hard in your head when you go to work them to not break character, period. Story 31. Not a character, but a security guard. At Disney, security has a character too. Look intimidating, and we can be. We've got a ton of different passageways and some lovely cells we'll lock you up in if we need to. Well, this one day, there was a domestic case at the parks. The cops took Dad away, and I, from that point, was to escort Mom and her little boy to their hotel room as they were worried that the dad would somehow sneak back into the property. They were very afraid. I was walking them, and I hear the mother talking softly to her son. "You see? Your mom is strong and we'll be just fine, the two of us. We're going to have a great trip. See that lady?" She gestures to me. "See, she's a girl too, and look how tough she is. I bet they gave us the toughest guard around." Well, later, I got called again when they were ready to go to the parks, as they were still paranoid that Dad would come back. I was walking them, and the little boy looks up at me and says, "Miss, I'm scared. Are you sure we're going to be okay?" And I stopped, knelt down to his level, and said, "You're going to be just fine. Your mommy's really tough, and she was right. I'm tough too. And best of all, my best friend, Mickey Mouse, made sure to tell all the strongest, toughest people in the park to protect you today. He put extra magic to make sure you two have a great day, so don't worry. Just have a fun." He brightened up and gave me a hug, and it was the first time I almost cried on the job. Story 32. When I was 6 or so, I went to Disney World with my mom and aunt and cousins. I really wanted Captain Hook's autograph, but per his character, he wasn't supposed to give it. I started crying over it, and my mom went and asked him again, nicely I hope, and told him that I was very upset over it. He signed my book, even though he wasn't supposed to, and I always thought that was neat. Story 33. I remember going to a Cinderella-themed restaurant, and one of the kids drew really funny portraits of each character and had a backstory for each. One stepsister just called out to the other one, and then they both called the stepmother and the prince over, all in character. Cue everyone in the restaurant seeing this and wanting photos. Because duh. Apparently they were never supposed to be anywhere near each other, and this was an anomaly. The non-character staff just stepped in and explained that wasn't happening. Story 34. Here's my story. It must have been 2008, and I went to Disneyland with my friend. Borat was the hottest movie ever, and I happened to stumble on a shirt that had the outline of Kazakhstan and the words, "Spring Break, Kazakhstan, it's nice." We ended up at some photo opportunity with Pluto, and he made a big fuss about my shirt, without saying anything, of course, just acting excited. When the photographer said, "Say cheese," the guy in the Pluto costume yelled, "Very nice." That was a funny and unexpected moment of broken character. Story 35. My kid loves to watch YouTube videos of Disney character fails. Them falling, getting stuck, costume parts falling off, etc. They literally never break character. Never. Story 36. I don't work at a park, but I went with a friend and we were getting photos with, interacting with Kylo Ren. Everything went great, and at the end of the visit, I told him I was going to work for the dark side. As he menacingly stared at me while I told him this, my example of doing something evil was that I would go spill someone's drink. This caused him to let out a barely audible, breathy chuckle. To this day, I consider that one of my greatest accomplishments. I have not accomplished much. Story 37. I auditioned to be a face character in Disneyland and made it to the stage where they run through scenarios of unruly guests, rude comments, etc. And you have to respond and come up with responses in character. My dance teacher was a face more than 20 years ago, and she had all kinds of stories of people trying to reach up her skirt. She was Pocahontas mainly. In the end, I'm glad I didn't make it through. At the time, it was like barely above min wage, which was like $8 an hour or something like that. Story 38. Performer from 06 to 12 at WDW. I can really only think of 2 times. I'm on mobile, so apologies for format, spelling. Firstly, anytime guests tried to jump a line, that really depends on the character I was friends with that particular day, because that can be handled in character if you're a villain, or most often for me, Woody. The most impactful for me was doing dining at Cape May Cafe at the Beach Club for the breakfast shift character dining. Goofy was my friend that day, with Goofy in a unique beach costume, swim trunks, button-up shirt, vest of various Goofy beach accoutrements, shoes that looked like Goofy's feet, and Tiva sandals, as it is a beach-themed restaurant. Now at this time, they may still do it, I don't know. The restaurant covered the tables on white butcher paper and provided crayons to draw on it with for the kids. I asked my captain if we were allowed to communicate using the paper and crayons. They asked if I could do the whole alphabet in Disney script or in Goofy's handwriting. I can do both still, to which I responded yes. As long as you write in one of those 2 ways and stay in character on paper, go for it, I guess. Boss, this day is going to be sweet and actually worth it, because I am not a morning person, and we are talking about this at 6 a.m. in a closet-sized green room. I can't remember exactly what set this happened on, could have been my 2nd or 3rd, but I'm out there doing my thing. The restraint is dead, so I can take my time with guests. Usually it's less than 45 seconds. Greet, high fives, sign books, picture, boom. I'm at the next table. Dining is not a friggin' joke. You gotta move, but I digress. So I'm chilling, spending a couple minutes per table, doubling back on families, because I've done full rotations. There was a large family group at one of the long tables, though. Probably 10 people. I'd already seen them once and heard the cast bring out a birthday cake and sing happy birthday to the little boy sitting at the head of the table, so I saunter on over as one would. They sing and cheer, and then the waitstaff leaves, and I notice Il Bro with a super sad face. The following convo happened on that paper, he responded vocally. And I think about it, and that young man at least once a week ever since, and I'm holding back some tears trying to write this right now. Me, why the long face, pal? Boy, I appreciate the cake, I just don't really like chocolate anymore, and it reminds me of when I did. Me, being a naive 19 years old. Oh boy, that doesn't sound fun. What made you stop liking chocolate all of a sudden? Boy, it happened during my chemo, and it never has tasted the same since. Bruh, I wasn't ready. Crap, dude, what do I say? What do I do? What does Goofy do? It was like a train hit me, y'all. I deflated and looked around at the family like, oh, it'd just been taste. I was kneeling next to him this whole time, so I did what character performers do better than any humans alive. I hugged him. I gave that young brother all emotional mana I could muster. I stood up, trying to hold myself together inside, and wrote, "You are stronger than you will ever know. We all love you so much, pal." I hugged him one more time, went straight back to the kitchen, found a vacant corner, and just cried into my head, up against a wall until it had all worked itself out. Then I went back out and kept going until it was time for me to come off set. That was the only time in my 6 years of performing I did that role or worked that location. I never got his name, but I can never forget his face. I hope he kept that cancer away and that his love for chocolate came back to him. Maybe it was 'cause I was fresh on the job and reality hit my butt hard, but of all the stuff I did at that job, that experience hit the hardest. Maybe it wasn't very out of character, but to my take on Goofy, it was. I was the one talking to that kid, not the fur. Story 39. I know this will get buried, but Op will like it. I chaperoned a gentleman with special needs to Disneyland as part of a group tour, when our group of special needs individuals met the characters. They were all absolutely incredible with our people. Minnie flirted with my friend I took. Merida flirted with me. But the best of all was Cruella de Vil. Normally, she insults whoever she takes pictures with. With us, she managed to stay in character but not say anything actually mean. She said to one guy with a cane, I like your cane. You can use it to beat little ones out of your way. Story 40. I don't work for Disney, but I work for Party Princess Productions that does Disney birthday parties on the weekends. I was Darth Vader in Malibu for this kid's bidet. It was only him, which was rare, but we had fun. We played lightsaber hide and go seek where when he finds me, we duel. I had him practice the Force on me, helping him focus and toss me to the wall. In the middle of all the fun, kid starts coughing. It's subtle at first, then gets worse. Gets to the point he's not breathing and he's not moving. I took off my helmet and was about to perform CPR when the mother came out with his inhaler. She told me he can't play anymore because he has bad asthma and it gets worse the more active he is. I put the helmet back on, played things off. We opened presents together and I left. To this day, I hate that mother for watching me play with her kid knowing his condition and not telling me a word until the poor kid nearly suffocated. I called my boss and told her that I need to know all medical conditions before the party right away from now on. I hope that kid had fun. I still feel horrible for almost killing him from teaching him the ways of the dark side. Story 41. My mom brought my niece to Disney, and while waiting to get on Haunted Mansion, the attendant was being a normal, grim, and creepy cast member. My niece was already kind of scared, and after the cast member said something creepy, my niece started crying. Anyone who works in the Haunted Mansion is never supposed to break character or smile. This one did. No, it's okay. They aren't real ghosts. Please don't cry. She got my niece to calm down a bit and continue to get on the ride. And my mom kept her mouth shut about that, knowing that cast member would be removed from the ride for doing that. Stepdad is also a cast member. This happened years ago, so I think it's safe to talk about it. Story 42. I'm not a character, but here is my story of it kind of happening to me. The first week of January in 2018, my family went to Disney World, it being everyone's first time except for my wife, and we were in line for the meet and greet where Kylo was on one side and Chewbacca was on the other. When we got to our turn, I let my two children who were with me go up first, just so they'd be okay with him, and so I could get extra pictures on my cell phone. At the time, I had a huge mustache that came out right at the corner of my mouth, but the hair could almost fall below my chin. Chewie saw me and got crazy excited. Might have been part of the show. He pointed to my mustache and brushed his face, then motioned like he was twisting his mustache hairs also. He really played it up, howling, thumbs up, the whole nine. When we posed for our Disney pic, he actually brushed my mustache with his hand and gave me an awesome hug. That was probably my most teary-eyed happy moment of our trip. Kids didn't understand why I was so joyous. I told them that me and Chewie bonded. Story 43. Obligatory, not me. But my best friend is a very popular face character, and she's told me some hilarious stories. One time, though, when she nearly broke character was when she was doing a meet and greet thing. A young autistic boy came in who got very overexcited and yanked her wig off. They put hundreds of bobby pins in your hair to keep them on so you can imagine the pain, and she had to restrain herself so hard to not scream out. She said the wig was hanging off her head, and everyone in the room just froze. The little boy started crying hysterically and had to be rushed from the room. They ended up closing her room up so she could get fixed, but she said it was a pretty crazy moment. Apparently the parents were so embarrassed they didn't even say anything to her and just bolted from the room with the boy. Story 44? Not Disney, but I was Bugs Bunny and Wile E. Coyote at Six Flags. I was punched in the face and punched in the groin. The kid missed his target, but you can always tell. It's usually some dad whispering to his kid, smiling and pointing at you. Then the kid nods and confidently starts heading your way. That's when you know he's about to go for the nuts. Story 45. Not a theme park character, but a witness. I saw a kid purposely barf all over Pluto's feet paws, much to the laughter of his friends, and then tell Pluto to lick it up. Pluto walked over to a nearby security guard and pointedly started cursing out the kid. Of course, the kid and his friends were thrown out of the park, but the kicker was what the kid said when security was escorting them out, and even asked what he hoped to accomplish by something so disgusting. I found this out when I overheard the guard consoling the Pluto guy. Pluto's a dog and dogs eat vomit. Figured he'd lick it clean. Story 46. My wife was goofy for a semester in college. She accidentally ripped the feeding tube out of a Make-A-Wish kid in a wheelchair going in for a hug with poor visibility from the costume. Luckily, all wandering costume characters have uniformed handlers to assist, but it's kind of hard to stay in character as Goofy after something like that. She felt terrible and was traumatized for weeks. The kid was fine, from that incident at least. It was a hassle to mitigate, but no medical damage resulted from it. Story 47. Ex-cast member here. While not a character myself, I did have to work the parade route from time to time, making sure kids didn't dart out in front of floats and such. Friends of characters would often be playful with CMS along the parade route, winking, making silly faces, etc. There was one day where Baloo came up to me mid-dance and proceeded to bow to me. Baloo also happened to be wearing some sort of crown, hat thing with a star on the top. Baloo probably wasn't aware of how tall that actually made them. Baloo managed to smack me right in the mouth with that star and giving me a fat lip. Fairly certain I heard Baloo audibly gasp when they stood upright again, paws to mouth. Immediately stopped dancing. Just stared at me. They tried to grab my hands and pull me to them, but their handler came and ushered them along. Oops. Story 48. When I was a young teen, I walked up to one of the toy soldiers at a Disneyland park in Florida. Forget which one. I lifted my leg to stand at attention and salute him, but I scared the crap out of the guy as he thought I was going to kick him in the sack. It was a pretty funny moment, actually. Story 49. I received word on my headset that there was an emergency at home. I immediately ran away, from where I was as Donald Duck. Turns out Mom called my boss. We weren't allowed to carry cell phones, obviously, and told him what was wrong. My mom had stage 2 cancer, but had it removed and is 4 years into remission. Story 50. Not a character performer, but I work with the costumes and dress the characters. One story I've heard is that during a family's meet and greet with Goofy, the performer in Goofy's voice whispered hi to the little kid they had. As the family was leaving, the kid told his mom that Goofy talked to him, but she told him that's silly because Goofy can't talk. The kid went back over to Goofy and told him that his mom didn't believe him and the performer. Now with their regular adult male voice whispered, "And she never will." As for the stuff I have seen, and none of this is really breaking character, but characters have had to be pulled off set for lots of different reasons. I've seen performers' hair falling out of the back of their head, characters' tails falling off, dresses coming off female characters, and other stuff like that. Story 51. Not a character, but worked there. Disney has a hierarchy of what's important in a guest interaction symbolized by the acronym CCC, which stands for safety, courtesy, show, efficiency. Safety first, obviously, and next is to be kind and courteous to everyone. After that, protect the magic, the show aspect of Disney by doing things like not walking through one land wearing another land's costume, or referring to Mickey as a real person instead of an employee in a costume. By saying things like Mickey's taking a break and not Fred's on lunch right now, but he'll come out as Mickey in 15 minutes. And efficiency, which is basically another word for working hard. One time during the Buzz Lightyear show at the Tomorrowland Terrace, called Club Buzz at the time, a kid came up to the counter crying because Zurg was beating Buzz, put him to sleep using a weird device on his back. And so the kid was really worried. The mom wanted us to just tell him it's fake. We did, though thinking back on it, we could have said something showy like, "Just keep watching. I bet Buzz will break out of his spell any minute now." But the kid was crying, so me and the other cast member just told him what the mom wanted us to say. No consequences because the boss wasn't around. Story 52. Former Disney photo pass. I was a photographer at Magic Kingdom for a year, and I got to work with the characters quite a lot. They have a way to deal with situations with characters. I have seen little breaks in characters, like laughing fits, but not anything a guest would ever really think is out of the ordinary. If there's a costuming issue, the attendant will fix it or pull them backstage quickly if they need to. If the character is having an issue of any kind that needs to be fixed, they let us know, and we try to fix it if we can. I've heard of stories, not sure if they are real or not, where characters have passed out on stage and have had to be dragged backstage. But most would say something before it gets that bad. On the hottest days set, times are reduced, and higher-ups are understanding when it comes to heat. Now the fun part. My favorite story is working with 2 characters. A cockroach ran across one of their feet and scared most of the cast members there. 2 characters, 2 attendant, and me. The characters were freaking out the most and couldn't even talk. So one of them decided to distress signal, then they both started to do it, both jokingly. Everything was fine, but that's probably the closest thing I've seen to a break. People just thought it was funny. Another time, a character tripped and fell. We were terrified, but they were just laughing and totally okay. Most breaks guests can't even tell have happened. CMS live and breathe character integrity, so the chances of anything major happening is pretty rare. Story 53. Not me, but a coworker of mine was Tinkerbell. Not just any Tinkerbell, but the flying one during Fantastic, or whatever they call it now. At the time, I'm unsure of now, as I have since moved on from working at Disney, Tinkerbell as a character was never portrayed by anyone in a close-up fashion. It was only portrayed through the show, and therefore always a long-distance portrayal. Well, my coworker was walking around downtown Disney, just burning time before she had to backstage to get harnessed up, and a family was nearby. And the daughter had collected nearly every character except a couple. The one she really wanted but didn't have was the Tinkerbell one. But because no one, at the time, portrays Tinkerbell in the meetable fashion, it would be impossible for the little girl to get it. Now, every cast member who becomes a character goes through autograph school, no matter what role you have or how often to face guests in a close manner. This rule includes Tinkerbell. So my friend explains who she is and asks the family to distract the little girl for a few seconds. She signs the autograph book without the little girl seeing and gives it back. The parents exclaim something that directs the girl's attention back, and they were like, "Wow, Tinkerbell heard you wanted her autograph and came and gave you this, and then just flew away." The little girl was so starstruck. Story 54. I was a character attendant with Rapunzel when a tour guide came through leading a family of several young children. The tour guide was quite loudly explaining to the family how Rapunzel's hair was attached without hurting the performer's neck. The guide was killing the magic in front of the kids and any non-tour members in the room. So Rapunzel gently pulled him aside and whispered, "I'm going to remind you of 2 words, character integrity." The tour guide called her a git to his group as they walked out. That was a fun day. Story 55. I once saw an employee dressed as a Viking in the Norway section of Epcot. He screamed a Viking war cry, and I instantly responded, "Skyrim is for the Nords!" His eyes lit up, and he let out a half laugh, half yell in response. It wasn't exactly character-breaking, but I knew he understood my reference. Story 56? When I was very young, probably 4 or 5 years old, I was on holiday with my family in Disneyland Paris. Back then, and even still today, you could buy autograph books for all the characters to sign when you saw them around the parks. One day I walked up to one of the Country Bear Jamboree costumed characters looking for an autograph with my little book in hand. We started talking about who knows what when, and I distinctly remember this bit. I playfully poked the bear's nose. I guess whoever was in the costume must have been having a bad day because they then snatched my little autograph book off me and threw it straight up in the air. I don't remember what happened after that, but I remember lots of tears from me and later getting a conciliatory private meeting with Mickey Mouse along with my family. Story 57. Not a character, but I frequently go to Disney in Orlando. My first time meeting Mulan, I walk right up to her and say, "You know I once had to cross-dress to join the military," without skipping a beat. She just said, "You must have brought honor to your family." She was wrong. I am a disappointment. Story 58. Non-Disney amusement park character here. The only times I've broken character were when my safety was being threatened. I've been punched in the face, spit on, tripped, shoved. My immediate reaction is to try and alert security, and, in one case, catch the kid who punched me. The park has always backed me up. Story 59. Not a character actor, but when I was 6 years old, around 2000, my family went to Disney World, and we went to see Aladdin and Jasmine in the Arabian section of Epcot. After I got my photos, we started to leave, but a huge crowd came at that time, and I lost track of my family. Scared and crying, I ran back to Aladdin and Jasmine, who were about to go on break, and told them I lost my mom. Jasmine comforted me while Aladdin went to look for my family. Jasmine held my hand, and we walked into the alleyway. I lost my family, and I saw my mom. To this day, Jasmine is my favorite princess. I don't remember her or Aladdin still in character, as there wasn't really anyone else around once they announced they were leaving for a little bit, but I still thank them for helping me find my mom and comforting me when I was scared and lost. Story 60. My sister has told me so many different stories. She was a lot of different characters, and the worst was when she was characters with a tail. One duck specifically, she said was annoying when guests would pull the tail. She said what people really don't consider is how small the person is in those outfits. The heads are super heavy and the padding around the body is not that protective. She said teenagers and some adults were rude and inconsiderate. She has back problems to this day from people who were too rough with her. She's only 5 feet and was like 140 tops. She also is claustrophobic and does poorly with large crowds because of her experiences. She said she had a lot of fun and met a lot of great people, and she wouldn't take it back, but it was a hefty price to pay. So, whoever actually scrolls all the way to this comment, remember there's somebody in that costume. Insignificantly smaller than it may seem, so don't be rough and be considerate of their space. If you wouldn't do it to a stranger, don't do it to a character. Story 61. In high school, we had a trip to Disneyland with choir. I think it might have been a pre-park opening photo op, but we said we were from Springfield, Oregon, and Goofy said very quietly, The Simpsons. It was very strange, and nobody else broke character the whole time, so we didn't say anything about it. Story 62. One time, a person in the Chips costume pointed to a hat I was wearing and gave me a thumbs up. We then told them we were from there, and the person in the costume started writing in our autograph book and whispering to my mom through the costume. We ended up finding out that the person had had one of my aunts as their teacher in elementary school. Story 63. I got scared at Halloween Horror Nights when a clown jump scared me. I accidentally tripped him and his face got a lot of road rash. I asked him if he was all right, and he didn't answer and hobbled back to where he came from and scared the next people. Man didn't break character for a rash face. Story 64. I used to develop photos at a 1-hour photo near Disneyland many years ago. Occasionally, I would develop photos of cast members in the back studio in various hot positions with their costumes on. I guess that's breaking character. Maybe not if it's Mickey and Minnie or Daisy and Donald. Story 65. My wife was battling cancer, and we wanted to experience Disney with our then 4-year-old daughter and sons, but we'd already been there with them years prior. Anyway, my wife was bald and in a wheelchair, clearly ill, and we were visiting characters from Inside Out. The kids were with the characters with us adults on the side. Sadness broke away from the kids, approached my wife, and just held her hands for a few moments, looking exactly as sadness does. The character, of course, wasn't demonstrating any emotion, but didn't have to because sadness looks like this sad, empathetic person, and it was just an incredibly touching moment. My wife has since passed away, and it remains one of my favorite memories. I guess that's not really breaking character, perhaps just the opposite, actually. And now, I'm crying. Story 66? Not Disney, but I was Daffy Duck at Six Flags Over Gay for 3 years. Worst experience was when a big guy picked me up and body slammed me to see if I'd bounce. Life Daffy did in the cartoons. He got banned for life from the park, and I got a busted face. Story 67. A friend of the family was in Tokyo Disney during a major earthquake. She was Ariel, and she was suspended up in the air. The pulley broke during the quake, and she was stuck. She couldn't break character till they all evacuated. Story 68. I was at Disney with my kids, and the guy playing Pooh must have been drunk because they were escorting him out, and he kept messing with guests on his way out. I was looking at my map just standing there, and he slapped it out of my hands. Story 69. One time waiting in line for Space Mountie right where you get on the ride, I saw a cast member lose his crap and start yelling at guests about where to stand in line. Immediately, 2 people appeared from nowhere and ushered him away while a third person replaced him. It was all over so fast and happened smoothly. Sadly, that guy was probably found dead in a ditch the next day. Those who have worked at Disney World, what behind-the-scenes stories do you have that the public doesn't see, NSFW? As a character, you are supposed to throw up in your mask if you are sick. Taking it off is not an option. You cover one eye with your hand and raise the other arm in the air to alert maintenance that you are not well. Also, if there is another character, same as you cannot, under any circumstances, be seen with them. You also must take a course to match signature style for autographs. Story 2. I don't work there, but had a relevant experience. The stories about underground passageways and secret police are 100% true. Was in the Magic Kingdom for a band trip in high school, hanging out with a few friends. One guy, we'll call him Jack, decided it'd be a good idea to shoplift some keychains from one of the stores. This being Disney, there were probably 50 different security cameras that saw this. A few minutes later, we're walking through a crowded area when someone gave me a flat tire and we stop. 2 big guys are behind us and quietly tell Jack that he needs to go with them and tell the rest of us to let our band director know he needs to get in touch with security. They walk Jack over behind one of the stores where there's a cast members only door and disappear behind it. Later, Jack told us they took him underground, where he sat in a security room for the rest of the day, where he was charged with shoplifting. They threw the book at him. They don't tolerate that crap at all. He got a huge fine and had to do community service in Florida. We lived in the Northeast. In retrospect, I have a huge amount of respect and a small amount of terror for how Disney handled the situation. They were incredibly subtle with the whole flat tire thing and how they quietly avoided making a scene. People walking past us had no idea what was going on. I know it sounds silly, but that experience alone probably helped me understand how terrifying and effective secret police in places like the Soviet Union. Story 3. Does it count if it's a different amusement park? The one I worked at has one of those sudden drop rides. A coworker found a single screw on the ground and they closed down the ride for days as they went over every inch of the ride. Turns out it was a screw that could have led to a seat opening and rider falling out if it hadn't been discovered. Story 4. If you hear an announcement over the park-wide sound system looking for a specific person, it is something very important. Announcements like that have a chain of approval before Disney will allow the magic illusion to be broken. But it's not always bad news, like informing families of a death. I've done several park announcements to find someone to inform them. An organ donation was matched. A medical courier was on their way to Orlando, and they needed to get to the hospital ASAP. Story 5. I worked a cash register in Tomorrowland. A guy had a heart attack and died about 10 feet from me. I called it in as soon as I saw, but they already knew about it. I went on break shortly afterward and saw the family, literally behind the scenes, crying their eyes out. That never happens. Guests are never allowed behind the scenes except when somebody dies, I guess. Really kind of heartbreaking. On a positive note, they all got lifetime passes. Story 6. I have an autistic cousin, and once, while we were riding the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, it broke down. My cousin flipped out, and Disney security literally appeared out of the walls. They took us into the back tunnels and into a freight elevator. Before we knew it, we're back outside. They were awesome in helping calm him as well. Story 7. I worked at Club Disney for the brief time it was open. We had codes we used on the radio headsets that were coordinated with character names. For instance, code Baloo meant there was blood that needed to be cleaned up immediately. One day, I'm taking a stroll around the club to check on things when I spot a small boy about 2 years old taking a massive dump right in the middle of the play area. He sees me, starts to cry, and runs away with no clothing on the lower half of his body. I get on the radio and can't think of what to say as we hadn't discussed a code for human feces in the play area and naked kid running around. So I just called, I have a code poo situation in the play area and piglets on the loose. I used to be a cast member at the Disney store in my local mall. We were required to greet everyone within 10 seconds of them entering the store. There used to be a game online that kids would play about getting to the back of the store, grabbing a stuffed animal from the plush mountain, and get back up front before getting greeted. I saw this one teenager run across the store and dove headfirst in the mountain of stuffed animals, only to quickly find out that they were on risers. He was taken away on a stretcher, but ended up being fine. And yes, I greeted him while he was in midair, so he lost the game. Former WDW cast member. I swear most of my crazy stories come from working there. Things I've seen. 1. More than once. Adult drop trouser and take a dump next to a line of people and walk off laughing. 2. A mother climb a tree and swing down in the middle of another family's meet and greet with beast. She didn't want to wait in line. 3. 3 people in wheelchairs in the same tree at another time. I have no idea. 4. A man tried to swim in Cinderella's moat during fireworks. I was guarding the ropes. I tackled him. 5. Snow White being thrown over the shoulder of a drunk man in Epcot in an attempt to carry her away. 5. A Brazilian tour group beat the crap out of Donald Duck. Story 8. I am a former Disney World Resort employee. I worked as a concierge at a deluxe resort, but sometimes had shifts at a value, moderate level resort. I came across a lot of famous and crazy people. Let me know if you have any questions. Government officials, including POTUS, normally stay at the Contemporary because it is the most secure resort. Celebrities want to stay in Cinderella's castle, but Disney has denied some of them based on how messy they have left hotel rooms before. Cast members see lots of famous people every day, all the time, bragging about who you know to try to get free stuff from people getting paid minimum wage won't get you too far. On the flip side, Disney gives out a lot of money. If you complain enough to the right cast member at your resort, especially when staying at a deluxe resort, there is a good chance you will get money back. Disney has a huge budget for this. When the Polynesian was under major construction, just coming off this now, they give out a lot of money to angry guests who didn't do research ahead of time. If you are nice to the cast members, they will go out of their way to make magic. I often sent up chocolates or gave extra fast passes to nice guests. If you're mean to cast members, you better believe we are putting notes on your reservation. Disney has a lot of computer systems and they track crazy guests' behavior. When you come up to the desk and scan your magic band, I will be warned if you have yelled or been out of line to another cast member. And that is across the board. All the Disney resorts use the same system. As for craziest stories, I have been asked where to get substances, where to go to get escort, and I also had a guest that ended up being a con woman. I've also had guests pass me their phone number. I can only imagine how bad it is for the princesses. You definitely learn a lot about people and grow thick skin working for Disney. I think that experience helped me get my current job, but also allowed me to have newfound respect in what may be the most difficult customer service industry around. Story 9. On our family trip to Disney World, I was leaning over a railing, looking down into some water. A few unreachable feet below, I spot a tiny alligator. Being from Africa and relatively unfazed with a slightly sharp swimming lizard, thought nothing of it. I called my mother over and said, "Look, an alligator! How cool!" Was this a mistake? Not 2 seconds later, ears everywhere, man, a staff member was looking over the railing, whispering on the radio. All broke loose in the most hushed, professional way ever. We were escorted away on a golf cart, and a huge section of the park was cordoned off. We were taken to a room where they were very apologetic for our negative experience and offered us a free day VP, the works. So we said a big thank you and took what was offered. In future, I will be smuggling other small, harmless creatures in for free stuff. I also got stuck on the big Thunder Mountain ride in Paris. Story 10. A friend of mine told me that the rules for workers at the European Disneyland were so strict that they took to calling it Mouse's Wits. When management got wind of this, they were told that anyone found using that name again would be fired. Apparently, it was only a couple of hours before they were calling it Ducko. Story 11. Everyone in the call centers is given a stage name, so no 2 agents have the same name to the guests. Most are unique stage names I can remember. Cotton, Casper, Arizona, Lucinda. When you're in training, they give you a selection of like 20 names to choose from, so you better hope you're one of the first ones to pick so you can get a normal name and not get stuck with Cotton FFs. Story 12. I worked on the Great Movie Ride in Hollywood Studies for a while, and I can tell you all 22 minutes of your friendly tour guide speech is scripted to the very last letter. You get 3 days to learn your whole monologue, and all of the speeds, controls, stops, goes of the actual ride before going live as a tour guide. Most of those 3 days is spent in a room with your trainer reciting your script until you get every word right. If you accidentally say the word okay instead of all right, you start over from the beginning. Most tedious 3 days of my life. There's also one button on Evercar that, despite being really close to buttons you have to touch all the time, if pushed, gets you fired immediately. Story 13. Compulsory. I never worked for Disney, but a friend did. Disney security listens to all Disney radio channels at all times for any distress call or other issue that is relevant to security. My friend, we'll call him Daniel, because that's his name, worked for Disney World in Florida once. He worked in one of the resorts. I'm not quite sure what his job actually was, but his radio call sign was Movie Runner. He was walking between resorts one night, and near a pool, he was cornered by a mama bobcat. Usually not a huge deal because the bobcat will eventually realize the person is not a threat. but he radioed the resort to let them know that he was being cornered by a bobcat. Next radio transmission without missing a beat. Movie runner, this is Disney's security base. We understand you are being cornered by a bobcat. Please remain calm. We have 2 units approaching your location. E to 2 minutes. Please acknowledge over. Story 14. My first day as a CP, college program intern, working at the Magic Kingdom in January 2005. After all the tours and fun stuff and exploring the tunnels, I had a meal at the Musketeria cafeteria and had my eye on Cinderella and some other princess, maybe Snow White, while I ate. They were mad. After the meal, I went out to wait for the bus back to the parking lot around the same time they left. Now keep in mind, characters aren't allowed to keep their costumes on as soon as they're off stage, so the princesses typically walked around in tank tops and short pajama shorts, but the with wig and full makeup. So I'm waiting for the bus and Cinderella and Snow White are full on crap talking some escort who slept with one of their boyfriends while chain smoking. Turns out they were talking about a girl who played Ariel. Seriously. 21-year-old me was in total shock because it was my first day and knew it could only get better from there. And it did. Like the time Aladdin and Peter Pan were making out on one of the tables in the same Mouseketeer. Or the time I saw Mickey Mouse give someone the finger underground directly after a parade. It's hot in those costumes. She was probably justified. Or the time a different Cinderella got really pissed because Paris Hilton was visiting the park that day and didn't go to see her. On the bus back to the lot, she was like, "I'm damn Cinderella. Why wouldn't she come find me?" Oh man, good times, good times. Story 15. You're not going to get anything super amazing. It requires a bus to get to the park as a cast member. The main entrance for CMS is under It's a Small World, and the Musketeer is right there too. There's also a salon down below. I got my hair cut there a few times just because the lady was nice even if she hit her hand open real bad once. The tunnels are in a pentagon kind of formation with a single line going from Fantasyland to Main Street. Main Street has a rectangle square under it and is decorated for guests because that's the portion of the tunnels the keys to the Kingdom Tour are taken. There's a few cafes in the tunnels, nothing amazing Aramark food, closed early always. In Exposition Hall, when I was there, that big theater that used to show movies was still there, just closed off to guests. We had meetings and parties in there all the time. That amazing mural of all the, then, Disney characters is there, hidden away by curtains. Toward the back behind Splash Mountain, I found the old Mike Fink keel boats, including the sign. I gave it to a friend of mine because he loved it, and I had no idea how to smuggle a giant wooden sign out of the park. The stairs going up into the park aren't labeled well at all. You learn your way by friends and trial and error. I used to use them all the time to pop up wherever I wanted, but I made a mistake once and ended up in the Hall of Presidents without realizing it. The Adventureland restaurant? Yeah, it's still there, just walled off. They use it for a few special events. I was taken in by a friend once. I've also been up in the windows of Main Street. The facade is about as wide as a gangway and hot. When they're recording for the parades, that's where the cameras are. I've been on top of Main Street to watch fireworks a dozen times, and I've been inside the suite in the castle. It's pretty, but nothing amazing. If you want juicy stories, you don't really get those unless a group is using the park. In the back of City Hall, there's a hidden room with plush furniture that looks like it's from the 19th century. It's a quiet room they take VIPs to when they need some silence, or if they need to give someone bad news, like a family member died. Kinda neat, but also sad. Story 16? Most likely get buried at this point. But I remember once I was leaving the park. You know how it gets ridiculously crowded at the exits when the park is shutting down? I got elbowed in nose. All of a sudden, the staff swooped in and took me to the underground tunnels, then to a golf cart that brought us to our car. Definitely a quick exit. Story 17? Just moved back from doing a Disney college program. If you see someone working at Disney has a name tag with their college on it, they are doing it also. I was an international rep, as are about 1/3 of the people living there. Adding to the sex context, we learned that a lot of the American girls there liked foreign guys. The things that go on in the housing complexes are astonishing. So much sex, so many substances, so much alcohol. Damn, every Monday night, us internationals have a Happy Mondays event where we get in our country's teams and go to bars to play other countries' teams in drinking games. I know a guy who was goofy. He used to do substance all the time. It's like a typical college campus, except 4 complexes of people who all work for Disney. My best story is the day I was working and managed to give a girl who was a guest in the park that day my number and met up with her that night and got up to stuff. Story 18. I was an intern in a few of the engineering departments at the WDW resorts. I bounced around areas like park operations, warehouse operations, as well as engineering design. Nothing too crazy in my past experience, but some cool things I recall. The tunnels under the Magic Kingdom stink like trash and old food. There's a room in the tunnels where teams of people literally sit and watch attractions, restaurants, and crowded areas. They help support operations with things like estimating wait times, but also act as an overwatch for any other important information. While working in that room, we definitely poked fun at the tourists getting caught in the rain, especially the ones on Tom Sawyer's Island. Since you can only get off by using a raft that would shut down during storms, large groups of people would get stuck on the island getting drenched. I was always dressed in a business casual attire. If I was out in the park collecting data or something, guests would assume that I was important since I was dressed up. Most of the time, I was approached to get yelled at for waiting too long in lines. None of the control systems for the attractions are accessible remotely or via LAN for security reasons. None of the attraction music turns off at night. It's real dark and creepy once everyone leaves the park. Story 19. I'm a former costumer through the college program and have worked at other theme parks also as a costumer. I worked at most of the locations at Disney World. Most times, the costume that a character, even if different performers, has worn was not washed recently to preserve the delicate materials, furs, fancy fabric, jewels, etc., or at all. Ariel's tail was never washed. Don't get too close to the beast. Due to the inability to wash most of the costume, we could only spray it with disinfectant and thus he smells the part. I've known some performers to refuse to wear the undergarments provided, or their own for that matter. So Jasmine might be enjoying the air down there as she poses with you. All uniforms that have Disney attributes are burned if beyond repair, or if there is no longer a venue for that costume. Unfortunately, I had to sneakily remove any identifying patches, tags to donate as much as I could to charity. Shift leads discourage donating instead of burning. I may have also snagged my share of unique Disney patches and buttons due to this. Magic Kingdom is nicknamed Tragic Kingdom due to some disconcerting souls working in the park who have somehow yet to be fired, or demoted, at least. New employees there are sweet though. Although the same disinfectant spray is only used in well-ventilated areas with gloves at other costume facilities, Disney doesn't enforce either of these things. There's a huge laundry facility behind Magic Kingdom which is basically a sweatshop, filled with lots of big, dangerous machinery besides the sewing machines. Although the clothing items are in crazy moving tracks that travel through the building up to the ceiling, which is pretty cool. Employees can sometimes have secret notes written about them on the wardrobe checkout system called Gus. Don't upset customers, because they can and will make things difficult or lie about an item being unavailable. Fun fact, most people don't know their pant size, or any size, and sometimes we would have to convince cast members to get a smaller or larger size instead to better fit them. Trust us, oftentimes a princess won't quite fit into her bodice since they like it to fit really tight. The costumer's solution: secretly switch out the bodice for a bigger size. Don't tell anyone besides other costumers and make a size note for future reference. Ariel gets strapped onto the boat and covered in a sheet at the end of Fantastic, since she can't run and take cover from the firework finale like everyone else does. The moat surrounding the island has plenty of pesticides to ward off mosquitoes and gas from the boats used in the show. It is connected with the river that connects Hollywood Studios with Epcot and all the resorts in between, thus the often ignored "no guests past this point" sign at the beaches. Epcot also has a hair salon. There are Subway restaurants backstage at Epcot and Hollywood Studios. The stairs to the top of the mountain at Fantasmic, no elevator, reach about 60 in number from the ground level. At the top, even if untrained in pyrotechnics, the costumer puts on glasses and a protective jacket, hoping they don't forget, and gets showered with sparks at the finale. Maleficent in Fantastic is almost always a huge dude in drag. They have mega super dryers that can dry clothes in 15 minutes, and heated air rooms that serve as huge dryers for delicates. Costumers love to try on costumes, even though we'd have to really make sure no one knew, or we'd be fired. Any money found in laundry became the discoverer's tip. So much loose change. Many areas have gyms and trainers, showers and lounges, and masseuses specifically for the performers to keep them in shape and hopefully happy. Way back, when Disney would rarely hire people who looked aged or were overweight in the slightest to uphold the Disney look. Any who became this way were usually placed in backstage positions. Sorry, worked a lot of Fantasmic. I'm sure I'm forgetting plenty more. Story 20. I used to work as a candy maker at Disneyland. The candy store was on Main Street, and there's a little pot of vanilla scent with a fan behind it to waft vanilla scent out onto the street where people are walking by. Once I saw a huge rat by the trash compactor when I was taking out some cardboard. Another time, I was written up by my manager for accidentally dropping like $1,000 worth of caramel apples because a feral cat came up and scared the crap out of me. Story 21. My cousin worked at Disney in the 90s. I haven't heard a lot of his experience, but I have been told that the cable that Tinkerbell flies down to the castle on once snapped, and she got a massive settlement, and Snow White gave him crabs. I need to talk to him more often. Interesting guy. Story 22. Ex-character performer. I'm a 6-foot-tall girl, so I did all of the tall characters like Goofy, Tiger, Captain Hook, and like 10 other characters. I did a lot of the breakfast meet and greets as Tiger. My head had a small hole where the mouth was. So I would go from table to table drinking orange juice from the kids. The kids were amazed, and it helped me get over my hangovers from the night before. I was stuck in an elevator for 45 minutes backstage as Tigger. Doing this job was awesome because I used to do a lot of partying and would get home at 6 a.m. and have to be at work around 8 a.m. So because I didn't have to show face or do much work, it was perfect. As Goofy, I snuck on rides. One day I went on one of the kiddie roller coasters and almost lost my head. I was eventually disapproved to play Goofy because he was starting to get a ghetto booty exact words from my supervisors. When you play the characters, you're 30 minutes on set, 30 minutes off. So in an 8-hour day, you really worked 4 hours, but you got paid for 8. If you talked in costume, you'd get in serious trouble. The underground tunnel is real. Oh, and I eventually got fired for asking Joey Fat One, back when NSYNC was on fire, for a picture before my shift off the clock. Story 23. One time, my brother and I got stuck inside the Pirates of the Caribbean water ride for about 20 minutes. Imagine being stuck there. We are listening to Yo Ho, the Pirate's Life for Me on repeat. It was about 15 minutes before my brother and I inside the ride yelled, "At least turn off the music." They did. Story 24. I think I've left a comment similar to this before, but I briefly trained for Kilimanjaro safaris at Disney World. At one point on the ride, you go over a bridge with crocodiles underneath. As I was riding with no one in the truck other than my trainer, she felt free to tell me that if anyone were to stand up and fall into the crocodile pit, I was to drive away immediately, so that others wouldn't have to see the carnage or try to rescue the person. The crocodiles are apparently fed from that bridge, and anything that drops from there is food to them, and they are surprisingly fast. Also, Divine had a mouth on her. Story 25. Former cast member at Disneyland in the 2000s. One thing that stood out for me was how many true believers there are at Disney. It helps to think of it as a cult. In any cult, there are people who've bought into the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. And then you'll have the people who's just joining for social reasons, like they might have no problems with setting witches on fire, but they crochet in their spare time. You'll find a lot of lifers there, people who work fairly menial jobs for decades. I used to know a guy who worked there for 30 years in 2007, so it will be about 40 now. I'm fairly sure he's still there. He worked there since he was like 20, is unmarried, and still lives with his mom. All this time, and he still works as an entry-level cashier. Never even moved to the back of the kitchen or into custodial where they pay more. Never made lead or manager. He's just content to do the same thing over and over again. There's a lot of people like there. Some of them finally left after the Great Purge of 2004 to 2006, but I can't imagine them doing anything else. Then you have those who are fanatical about upholding Disney's rules. One of the things they teach you was CCIC, which stands for safety, courtesy, show, efficiency in that order. That means you make sure people are safe above all, then be courteous, then uphold the Disney magic, then efficiency. Most people won't have problems with this, except the ones who take it into their own hands. There was a Buzz Lightyear show in Tomorrowland Terrace, which at the time was named Club Buzz. It was a 18-minute show they played 6 times a day, and during part of it, Zurg had the upper hand over Buzz by putting him to sleep. There was a kid freaking out over that, and his mom came to us with him crying, asking us to tell him it's fake and everything will be okay. My crazy manager at the time decides to try and play along and tell him to keep watching the show. This kid literally thought the universe was going to be taken over by Zurg. I'm sure the last thing he wanted to do was sit down and eat his overpriced hamburger. Occasionally, Disney will rent out part of its park to corporations for some function or another. These were handled by special events, but due to the randomness of the party size and hours, a lot of them were done after hours. They usually pull people from all over to work these events. So one night, I was working special events for some corporate party. A few hundred businessmen and women piled into California Adventure one night after the park and closed and had their own private Disney party. It was a hot night, probably the middle of summer, and even though it was like 10 or 11 p.m., the temperatures were still pretty bad, like in the 80 AS. I had a small bottle of water with me as I stood out in some remote area directing traffic. Normally, you're not supposed to drink or eat in front of the guests. I guess because, in addition to giant rodents, Disney liked to pretend it fielded a servant army of indestructible robots, or something. But mostly because of the show aspect I mentioned before, we were to refrain from doing certain things on stage. However, this wasn't a gaggle of school children. These were adults, and it was hot. So I didn't think much when I took a drink from the water bottle. Out of nowhere comes the special events manager assigned to my area. She took me backstage and berated me for doing that, telling me it wasn't so hot because it was night and that I was in big trouble. Luckily, that was the last special events I had to work for a while, and so nothing happened to me. These types of people are probably there in any business with history, but it seems there was a lot more of them at Disney than elsewhere. Story 26. I worked at Splash Mountain. Sometimes we had guests decide it was a great idea to hop out of the log because they didn't want to ride anymore. Well, we know about that every time. The ride is littered with motion sensors, pressure pads, the like. I have a photographic memory of the ride layout, and even I wouldn't be able to avoid being detected out of the log. The flashers don't happen very often. Actually, it's usually men with their shirts off. In this case, their ride photo is blanked out, and they can't purchase it. We always had parents trying to sneak kids who didn't meet the height requirement. I do remember we had one family who kept trying for hours, thinking that the cast don't talk to each other about problematic parents. Ride evacuations were always interesting. But as long as you were strong and confident with the guests, they always listened. It's real important to walk them through what's going to happen and let them know you've done this more than enough times. I also teased them that they were going to get a backstage tour, but it was going to be real brief. And as long as they didn't take pictures, they'd get a fast pass for their troubles. Every day was an event, but I loved every minute of it. Story 27. Ex-cast member here. When I worked there, everyone was ducking everyone. Employees are pretty much split into three types of people. Old, bitter cast members, those who have worked there forever, Disney freaks. Weird kids that love to play in the parks by themselves and never staff you about all things Disney and, regular folks, I guess. Eventually turn into the first type also. Everyone is gay, which is great. Because if you're a straight guy, girls will love you because you're a rarity. Even if you're ugly, if you're a gay dude, you got so many options. If you're a straight girl, well, there's a good chance you ducked an ugly dude. The Disney college program is a beautiful thing too. Those kids love to party. Disney is pretty big on appearances, and their standards are high, which is part of what makes it a great company. But behind the scenes, you'll find some ghetto crap. I remember some ride control boards being held together by duct tape. Ha, ha. Also, this happened at Disneyland, which is significantly smaller than Disney World, but I imagine things work more or less the same. Crap was wild, though, and so much fun. Someday I'd love to share my journal entries of my time there. Like 16 versus 16, and not just dudes, either. I'm talking kids, ladies, old Mexican grandmas. It was wild. Once things settled down, I was inspecting the scene and I noticed, in the middle of this mess, a Disney guest button that read, "I'm celebrating." It reminded of the comedian's smiley face button from Watchmen. Oh, just remembered one of my first holiday shifts. New Year's Eve 2011. The place was uncomfortably packed, shoulder to shoulder, with angry guests waiting for the fireworks show in front of the castle. One particular drunk guest got tired of not being able to move through the crowds and headbutted my coworker when he couldn't get past. My coworker is pretty big dude, so he gets right back up and lays this dude out with one swing. Drunk guy turns out to be an off-duty cop. My friend spends New Year's in Disney jail with a broken nose and gets fired that same night. Apparently, you're never supposed to fight back even in self-defense. I think the employee handbook even mentions the proper course of action is to lay in the fetal position until help arrives, haha. Also, kids love to sneak in substances for grad night, but they suck at keeping that crap on the low, and everyone likes to bang on small word during slow nights. I don't blame them though. Backstage SW is a primo spot for fun activities. Well, for cast members anyway. Story 28. Lots of guiding about guests, lots of guiding about co-works. Some people have code words for tourist groups. The Epcot underground tunnels smell like copper. It's just a job, nothing that exciting. You do bump into characters. Story 29. Oh, the stories I have. Mrs. Incredible is always a little short dude who they put the proper padding onto. I was friends with a friend of Cinderella who was fired for getting too fat and too old to be a face character anymore. I've photographed Darth Maul during his show during the day, and then his drag show at night, elsewhere, obviously. I've seen every character swear and whatnot backstage. My favorite to this day was Christmas Minnie, talking about how much she damn hates kids in a Brooklyn accent. But the biggest travesty I saw? I was one of those people who brings you the overpriced photo while you're eating dinner at the resort dining. We had a cycle there. You were a runner for a bit, a photographer, an editor, etc. Sometimes if we were busy, you got to be a runner for 8 hours, which sucked. But hey, I made do. Then there was the pregnant woman who was having a difficult time with her pregnancy, told to stay off her feet by the doctor. I would try to take her runner duty anytime I could. Runners weren't allowed to sit at Chef Mickey's, which is where I was a lot of the time. So I would also sneak her a chair. You could see the pain she was in. I was reprimanded by a manager, who was insistent that the woman walk around and do the same duties as everyone else, and didn't like that I would trade my sitting duties, such as editing, to her. Man, I moved to work as a photographer after a while of that. I never found out if she made it all the way to term. Story 30. I'm probably too late, but I was an intern once for Disney. Around Jan, May, the housing department does a purge. They will over-accept people into the program, knowing that they will terminate bad kids. The term bad kids is very vague. It can be anything between a kid whose roommate doesn't like them to an actual bad kid who is underage drinking. They really just look at the numbers and terminate interns where they please. Story 31. You cannot and will not say under any circumstances that you have seen a cockroach, pest, or other nuisance in the park. You also can't say pass over the radio. An example would be, my radio battery died. I got chewed out pretty hard about that one from my managers. Story 32. Not a cast member, but I was aboard the Gully Wumper that went around Tom Sawyer's Island at Disneyland. It was the last ride of the day and they got it up to, or possibly past its capacity. Around the first corner, some water came up over the side of the boat. The cast member that was operating the boat commented on it and said, "We should try and even it out on the other side. You see where this is going." On the third try, everyone shifted and the boat capsized. There was an enclosed intersection where my brother, sister, and I were sitting, and being trapped for a few seconds in the water was the scariest part. It didn't take long to realize the water was a little over 5 feet deep. We just focused on getting everyone out. Cast members were coming from every direction from places that seemed improbable. They were throwing inflatable life vests into the water and getting people on dry land ASAP. It was amazing how quickly they responded and how well coordinated they were. They put us on a bus behind the scenes and took us to a medical facility. They asked us if we were okay, if we had any conditions that should be monitored, what we lost or was ruined. We all were honest and told them we were fine and had some ruined clothing and lost glasses. I will never forget watching people who were fine as we all checked on each other and watching the thought dawn on them of what they might be able to milk Disney for. I will also never forget the look of the cast member who was piloting the boat with his head in his hands, crying his eyes out. It was obvious this guy liked his job. We were compensated for our lost, damaged items, and they comped us dinner at the Blue Bayou restaurant. We also got fistfuls of front of the line passes to last us our trip. I was just impressed with how well they handled it. Story 33. I worked at the DLR in Anaheim. I won't say which department. Still afraid of Gestapo Disney HR people. I found an unattended lunch pail that was almost certainly harmless. Knowing how much of a stickler that Disney is with security concerns, I decided to call it in. Within 2 minutes, they had 3 security cars blocking off the area I was in, and the Pluto, substances and bomb-sniffing dogs that assist security, teams deployed to sniff the bag. My supervisor's supervisor questioned me for 30 minutes about the situation, told me there was a commendation on my record, and then let me go home early for the day. After that, I figured out the secret to ID hidden security people in the park, as they were the first to approach me after the radio call. If they have a Bluetooth headset in, they're undercover security. Story 34. This is more of a happy, peace of mind one. I used to be a lifeguard at some resorts on property and every now and again worked at a water park. The amount of safety, lifeguard training we go through is insane. It begins with you watching a real-life video of a kid drowning, a 3-day CPR course combined with both deep and shallow water rescue techniques. We are then tested on all aspects, and if you fail one section, you have to take the 3-day course all over again. If you fail that time, you're out to food and beverage. Sorry. After we start working at our locations, managers will visually audit us to make sure we are watching our water properly. A few times a month, Disney managers will even drop a fake silhouette of a drowned kid on the bottom of the pool to see how quickly we see and get to it. But that's not the best. The training company that Disney hires to train the guards come in and do their own audits on our performance in real time. That is, a total stranger will enter the pool and pretend to have a serious accident, begin to drown. And we are judged on our speed and accuracy in delivering the save, while managers hidden in certain areas will videotape you. You then watch yourself save a person pretending to drown and are given a pass or fail. Failing means you're out. Thanks for coming. Then, twice a month, all lifeguards have to attend mandatory rescue training, which is held at the crack of dawn. Imagine 15 young adults splashing around pretending to blow whistles so we don't disturb the guests, and hauling each other out of the water. Some poor cast members had to swim in their entire costume due to tattoos, but this is all done, so we are 100% rescue ready, and as such, you'll find little to no fatal drownings on Disney property. They are insanely strict. The hours suck, and during my time there, I felt more like a babysitter than a guard. But please don't ever worry about the quality of our training. We are all ready and raring to save you. Story 35. I'm not an employee, but this is a customer service story. When I was about 9, my grandfather passed, who had a Disney pass with some type of credit and such on it. But we went down to Disney on a trip and we were intending to move them off his card and onto my parents' cards. Well, this was still a sad time for me as me and my grandfather were really close, so I went outside while they dealt with all the stuff. While I was out, there was a security guard playing with toys and entertaining kids that were in the same position I was with the parents being inside and not wanting to be in there. But he saw me being rather down and sad about everything and came over to me, asked what was wrong. And as I explained, he became visibly sad as well. He told me that his grandfather had passed a few years back, and they were close as well. He gave me a few pins that were like the special ones with the little silver Mickey head on then and said he would get my family into the special area in Epcot to watch the fireworks, which he did. And it completely made the trip for my family. I still have those pins because they are one of the coolest things I've ever gotten from someone. Story 36. Person I went to school with had a job with security there. She eventually got married and had children. WDW hired her husband and the kids. They walk, patrol around as a family. As far as I know, they still work there. Story 37. I went there with my dad, who was working for a radio station at the time. Disney was opening a new ride and doing the press rollout and invited the radio station there, so I guess you could think of him as a temporary employee. One of the crew spilled soda on a mic and asked the Disney guy helping the crew where he could look for a replacement locally. He assumed Disney would have spare mics, but he was worried about getting the random special snowflake of a microphone the DJ insisted on. The Disney guy just laughed and took him to the underworld. They had rooms full of TV, radio equipment new in the box. They have spares from every brand conceivable, by the dozen. Millions and millions of dollars worth of it, just sitting there collecting dust most of the time, just in case. When Disney wants to be prepared, they don't duck around. Story 38. Secret police. Computer systems to track unruly behavior at any point in your life. Extreme intolerance for troublemaking dissidents, till Disney is running a highly efficient, skillfully veiled state. Story 39. I started working at the Little Mermaid ride in the Magic Kingdom about a couple weeks after it opened. I worked there for 7 months as part of the college internship thing. It was a ton of fun, and I'll never need to go to Disney World again because I've been there so many times. Anyway, the Little Mermaid ride actually broke multiple park records on attendance and speed of getting people through the line. That did not stop huge lines from appearing if people came in big enough crowds. Seriously, if you see a Brazilian tour group at Disney World, just go a different direction. You can look at any cast member's face and see the rancor they harbor. One particularly hot and crowded day, I went on break and was walking to the secret underground subway. On my way there, I walked through the backstage side of all of the Little Mermaid ride. There are actually a few passages to the back, but they are pretty boring, and you'll typically be seen pretty quickly. The problem is that those passages are still easily accessible, and a large amount of guests actually think they are bathrooms. As I walked past one of those doorways, I noticed a bit of a weird stain on the wall. I got closer and discovered a giant crap stain on the wall that lead to the ground with a huge pile of human feces. Like an adult had to have done this because of both the height of the crap stain and the sheer size of the turd. Either way, y'all guests can be nasty. Story 40. About 15 years ago, I was working at Disney's Magic Kingdom for college credit, and although I stayed at my own place, I went to several parties at Vista Way, otherwise known as Vista Lay, and let ME tell you, you have never seen such a party place, ever. Imagine women and men, if that's what you're into, from all different countries and nationalities. Don't forget Epcot is in Orlando, and each country has different nationalities working there. Every night there were parties. Over there were the gymnasts from the Cirque du Soleil show in downtown Disney. In that corner were the Chinese acrobats from the China Pavilion. Over by the couch were the Japanese girls who would bang on those large drums all day. Man, they had developed forearms. The girls from Mexico were there playing beer pong. Over by the window, the Italian girls dancing by the makeshift DJ table in the center of the room were several of the Disney princesses, half-wasted of their rockers dancing to Britney Spears' newest hit, and outside in the hot tub were the Irish girls from the Riverdance troupe who would only be in town another 4 months or so. I was part of a frat in college, and there was nothing I've seen that ever came close to how easy it was to get wasted, high and laid, than when I worked at Disney in Orlando. Story 41. Not an employee. I do, however, have an amazing experience. 2 years ago was my first time going to Disney World. At the time, I was 29, yet I was as excited as any child could possibly be, as my girlfriend and I were purchasing our tickets from the themed hotel we were staying at. I casually commented to her how excited I was to finally be here and fulfill a childhood dream. The woman who was printing out passes heard this. With a huge smile, she handed me a first-time visit pin for me to wear. Throughout the day, dozens of park employees welcomed me or told me to enjoy my visit. I even received special attention from passing cast members in costume. We ended our first night at Space Mountain. This, of course, was the ride I was most excited for. After our ride, the park was closing, and we were some of the last people to ride Space Mountain as we were walking out and nearing the exit. I realized I left my sunglasses in the netting provided on most of the rides. We walked back to the ride, and I asked one of the attendants if they found a pair of sunglasses. After a few minutes, they confirmed they had them. Expecting them to get them and bring them to me, I was surprised when they invited us to go back inside to the rides boarding area. My glasses were given back to me, and the operator noticed my first-time visit pin. He then asked if we wanted to ride Space Mountain again. The ride was completely empty, and we got to sit in the front car. Disney has forever made a lifelong memory and lasting impression. I will remember for the rest of my life. Story 42. My dad worked at Disney in college. He drove the ferry boats in the Magic Kingdom, I believe. Anyway, one day he was walking around the park and saw some woman kicking the Cinderella castle. He took her aside to reprimand her, and she told him a brick had come loose and she was just replacing it. When he informed her that the bricks are painted onto the castle, she threatened a lawsuit for injury to her foot. Story 43. When I lived in Orlando, I knew a woman that played Tinkerbell. She described the audition to me once, and it's pretty intense. First, you have to be incredibly tiny and light, because your job involves you riding a zip line each evening from the top of Sleeping Beauty's castle, Cinderella's castle, to the top of a restaurant in Tomorrowland. And if you're heavy, things could get messy. The final part of the audition involves being suspended from a 100-foot crane for like 2 hours to ensure that you aren't afraid of heights. The girls that get this far tend to drop like flies at that stage, many of them in hysterics after about 20 minutes. I had a lot of friends who worked there, many of them characters, and it was apparently a really tough job. Story 44. When I first started working at WDW, I was in the Bib Beady Bobili boutique in Cinderella Castle. I was a fairy godmother in training and helped do little girls' hair, makeup, and nails. It was easily one of the most fun jobs. Plus, we got tips. One thing that sticks out is I had a little girl come in and I found 2 strange lumps in her scalp. I thought maybe they might be moles, but on further inspection, they were 2 ticks. We have a code for lice, Pumba, but I wasn't sure what to call this one. I called a manager over and she pulled the parent aside and explained the situation and that we would be unable to do her daughter's hair because of the ticks. The mother grabbed her daughter out of the chair and a Kleenex and ripped the ticks out of her daughter's head and handed them to the manager in the Kleenex. We were all kind of in shock, but she got her done. I also had a kid ask how a peach and brown could be friends, referring to myself and one of my good friends in the boutique who is African American. That was an awkward one, especially since the mom was an ABC cast member. Story 45. I worked at MGM in 1999, college program. I was headed to the cafeteria when I encountered a music video being shot backstage. I saw a pretty girl walking near the set and said hi. She said hi in a super high-pitched voice. She then proceeded to stare at me for a minute or so. I felt awkward and asked if I knew her, like maybe met her on a drunken night at Pleasure Island. She violently shook her head and nearly yelled, "No, I'm a singer!" I felt awkward. It was like talking to an entitled 4th grader. So just said, "That's great. What do you sing?" She pouted and huffed away. Obviously upset I didn't know. Turned out it was Britney Spears. Her video for Baby One More Time had recently come out, but I'd never heard of it at the time. I just thought it was strange some pretty young girl was acting like a stereotypical drama queen, and thought it was strange she was upset. I didn't know her when all I wanted was to get some dinner on my break. Story 46. I worked at Disneyland in college. It's oddly weird seeing a mouse character as the boy mouse, but the person inside is a very aged female. If I remember correctly, she was smoking too, which I thought was odd since I didn't think those in a costume could smoke in them. Backstage at Disney can ruin all the normal fun of the park. It was a great experience though. Story 47. Don't work at Disney, but I've been there several times and was lucky enough to get some behind-the-scenes action one time. It was around a year ago, and my friends and I got stuck on the Pirates ride. We waited out, and the ride was broken down completely, so they let us exit through some emergency exits on the side by the props. We then saw all the heavy machinery that's hidden from the public, and the place reeked, and there were cigarette butts all over the floor. Must have really killed the magic for some of the kids there. Once we got in the park area again, there were kids and balloons and all the typical Disney stuff all around again, a complete opposite. On the bright side, they gave us free fast passes for any ride, for what it's worth. Story 48. After the park closes, a massive army of maintenance workers invades the place. Third shift is the largest group of workers on staff. They inspect every inch of every rail of every roller coaster looking for cracks. Any cracks that are found are welded. If you look carefully, you can see stubs of welding rods littering the edges of the tracks. All of the seats from the Star Tours ride are removed and checked for cracks, which are often found. It's kind of amazing how much the rides get beat up during a day in service. Pressure washers and steam cleaners are used to clean the sidewalks and remove the numerous pieces of gum, spilled food, etc. Sometimes, the landscapers do a complete makeover where entire areas of landscaping, sometimes including trees, are removed and replaced with a new design. Everybody is always watching the clock. All work must be done, and trucks and tools must be removed before opening after finishing work and putting everything away. It's almost impossible to find a beer in Orlando at 9 in the morning. Story 49. A family friend played Aladdin at Disney World. Very gorgeous Italian guy. Actually married a girl who played Jasmine. It was an amazing wedding as her family was filthy rich. Wedding at the biggest Catholic church in Seattle. Reception was the top 2 floors of the Columbia Tower, tallest building in Seattle. Here I was in awe that I was in these amazing places, and they had a room at reception that was just chocolates. Yes, a damn chocolate room. But the truly cool thing was seeing my 5-year-old cousin in awe as Aladdin and Jasmine were dancing their first dance. It was magic. The bride even went out of her way to talk to her as Jasmine. Her own wedding, and she played the part. so special. Sadly, the marriage didn't last. But for that night, seeing a princess through a child's eyes is an amazing memory. Story 50? 3 situations that stand out on my visits. First one was someone put their hand in my bag and grabbed my wallet at a value resort. She was old and with her son, I yelled. They checked my ID. They took her away and gave my daughter a large stuffed animal. Second was last year. I tripped in Main Street and fell on the concrete, landed flat down. The person in front of me stopped suddenly. I never saw so many people show up so fast. I had no idea. I was fine. Sat for a couple of minutes and moved on. Last, I put my knapsack down to take a picture and someone stopped immediately and told me not to leave it on the ground. I felt safe there, but oddly watched. They must have a ton of people on safety duty. Story 51. If you hear anyone say, protein spill at, it's vomit. Many of the onstage props in the park have concealed doors, compartment for janitorial supplies. The pay sucks. We have to point with 2 fingers when directing people to a location in order not to offend some cultures. We are supposed to practice the Disney scoop, quickly pick up trash on the fly whenever possible. If you spill a drink or drop your food, you can ask for a new one free of charge. Story 52. We lost my little brother at the Magic Kingdom when he was 5 or 6. We were walking to the main area to watch the firework castles and turned around and he was gone. My mom went over and told the security guard. He turned around, said something in his radio, and then said the park has been shut down. They wouldn't let anyone out until he was found. They take it crazy serious and don't mess around. All the other security that came to help us wore plain clothes. Crazy to think how many are there. Turns out, the little bro went to look at swords at one of the vendor carts. He was fine. Story 53. I haven't worked there, but here's something interesting. During a security threat, like the 11th of September, cast members head to the back of the park, link arms, and slowly head to the front. Normally takes like 2 hours to clear out, but I forgot the exact number. It took them like 15 minutes on the 11th of September. Also, Rob Playstat Game has a bunch of amazing videos about Disney World if you want to learn more. Story 54. My dad worked at Disneyland and one of his jobs was a diver on Jungle Cruise. Basically, they'd swim along the boat's path and clear debris, check for any issues. He told me that one time. Among the many strange objects they would find in the water, he found someone's leg. Not a real leg, mind you, but a prosthetic. It was never claimed either. How someone could lose their fake leg and not report it is beyond me. Story 55. When I worked there, I was totally aware of the Disney look policy. I worked at one of the restaurants. I tried anyway to grow out my mustache there. After 2 weeks, a manager saw my half-grown mustache and brought me off stage and back into their office, reminded me about Disney look. Pulled a razor out of the cabinet and told me to go to the bathroom backstage and shave it off. I could grow one on my own time, but not at work, was what the manager told me. Story 56. I worked at Magic Kingdom last year as a popcorn, ice cream vendor, so I got to work in every land. I had to memorize the tunnels completely because getting lost in there was pretty freaky. The worst segment was under Adventureland, Frontierland, since it was dark and smelled like rotten eggs in some parts. Also, I had to stay way past Park Close on some nights to clean the popcorn wagons. And the park gets really eerie when no one's around, but the music is still playing. But the plus side to it was getting to see the practice runs for the Festival of Fantasy Parade before it debuted. Story 57. So one thing I gather from this thread is that guests in the park are watched constantly. Is it accurate to assume that if I'm in a restroom stall and run out of toilet paper, a hand in a Mickey Mouse glove will instantly reach under the door offering a fresh roll? Story 58. Worked at WDW for 18 months a long time ago, and actually, it was a good experience. I worked as a stuntman at the Indiana Jones stunt show at what was then MGM Studios. The only real gossip is that there were a lot of injuries. I mean, a lot. The show is very difficult and brutal on the bodies of performers. Day in, day out, 10 shows a day, year-round, and you're going to see some serious pain. Story 59. I had a guest ask me if he could get a refund on his park admission because it rained at park closing. I've had a guest ask me if we gave out consolation gifts when Fantastic gets canceled.